I'm your host, Tyler Nixon. Roger will be with us shortly. We're just having a little technical glitch, I think, because Stone's communications lines are all wiretapped, as we know, subject to the Obama administration's interventions and spying on any of its political opposition in favor of the Democrat Party. So, yep. Sorry, folks, we just had a slight technical error there. We're waiting on Roger. We got a great show ahead, and we apologize for any technical glitches. We have John Kiriakou, who is a CIA whistleblower who was imprisoned for 2 years for coming out with the torture memos or the torture documents that conclusively prove that the CIA was in fact using torture as a means of interrogation in this war on terrorism, and subsequently claimed that they had deleted a 6,700-page report. Now, as John Kiriakou points out, you don't just delete a 6,700-page report. These are top-secret sensitive documents. They exist in physical form in the General Counsel's office of the CIA. You don't just go in and delete them. You'd have to physically destroy the actual file. And if you've ever seen 6,700 pages, that's a big stack of paper, folks. That would be, imagine if you have a ream of printing paper, that'd be 12 or 13 of those stacked up. This is the report that was destroyed, and he was imprisoned for this. I mean, this is really where we've come, unfortunately, in America today, where if you report on government malfeasance, if you expose some of the more nefarious, underhanded, and illegal acts of our government and the deep state, you are targeted, you're imprisoned, and Obama was particularly pernicious on this front. Really, I think whistleblowers should be praised. They should be absolutely lifted up and encouraged, in my opinion. There's nothing that our government does anymore, I think. Maybe in the days of communist, the Soviets, where we had these massive, let's face it, folks, whatever spying is done on us, there's nothing that's going to be secret about it. Held top secret, let's just say, at least domestically, that needs to be withheld from the American public, particularly once it's disclosed, and imprisoning those who would bring it out. I personally think that's objectionable to the highest degree. Today, President Trump tweeted out that he believes Trump Tower was wiretapped, and that President Obama directed this or was involved in this. This is what I actually had discussed with Roger last week and alluded to the exact same thing, which is I do not believe that these people who have been running this administration for the last 8 years, the Obama administration, in any way whatsoever, would hold back on using everything they could to spy on, to wiretap, to destroy and otherwise sabotage their political opponents. Let's not kid ourselves, folks. Obama, Clinton, they're all wrapped up in the deep state. They were, buddies with the buddy with the intelligence community, which is why the intelligence community, quote unquote, came out so vigorously against Donald Trump and is still trying to destroy him. I mean, this is unprecedented, really, under Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court wiretaps and warrants, that you would have an administration that is in bed with the candidate for president on one side of the equation, in this case Hillary Clinton, who was a prior member of that administration, would be wiretapping and spying on and requesting warrants without any review. Of course, mind you, this is all done in secret, against the opponent of that person. I mean, it's unprecedented. Richard Nixon, I mean, they talk about Nixon being, engaging in dirty tricks and this kind of thing. I mean, Nixon did it, what Nixon's, the plumbers, Watergate, that kind of thing, that was done sort of covertly and admittedly illegally. They're in the Obama administration with this ilk, they're trying to literally co-opt our government and the entire intelligence superstructure that's built up within it to accomplish these dirty deeds. And I think it's disgraceful, it's disgusting, it's illegal. People should be in prison, they should be prosecuted. And it's unfortunate, though, because I think we really are seeing a fissure within our government whereby we have this out of control so-called intelligence community, which is just sort of the tip of the iceberg of the deep state that we actually see with their black budgets and all the kind of stuff that's going on that they would never disclose to the public, because the public would be outraged, would demand justice for starters, as much as for transparency and for an end to this kind of crap that goes on. It's really, I mean, since the days of John F. Kennedy, obviously Roger wrote a great book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, which is not just about Lyndon Johnson being behind the murder of President Kennedy. It's really very much about the CIA. It's a story of the CIA and its more rogue elements. You hate to use the actual full agency to say the CIA is compromised. I mean, there's probably good people working in the CIA, I have no doubt. But the bottom line is, institutionally, when they refuse to come into line with what is, I think, most Americans' view of what our government should be in terms of transparency and having some level of popular control over these mechanisms now of immense power that can destroy a person's life, that can completely spy on everything you do. I mean, in this day and age, unless you're literally a hermit, a Luddite hermit, there is no way for you to escape the ability for any of these intelligence agencies to monitor you at any given time. And even your cell phone, when you turn it off, as I understand it, there's technology, of course, created in league with these large telecoms who, frankly, have sold the store or handed over the store to the intelligence community, to the CIA and others. They can monitor your phone calls, or your conversations when your phone is turned off. They can turn on your microphone and listen to whatever is being, picked up by that microphone in the room, as long as there's a battery in it. So you have to literally dismantle your phone to even not have the ability of someone sitting in some faceless chair moistener sitting in some bowel of the NSA somewhere who can flip a switch and just completely expose your entire existence and probe you in any way that they see fit with no review. I mean, I just wonder what the control mechanisms are in place for this. And as I said, the Clintons, particularly the Clintons, running against the Clintons as President Trump did, I mean, that takes courage, because they are the dirtiest, most underhanded, corrupt, nefarious ilk that have ever infested American politics in recent memory, certainly in modern times. I mean, there's nothing they would not stoop to. And I certainly believe that in the Obama administration, they absolutely believed they were going to win. Everybody believed Hillary Clinton was going to win. That was going to be the end of it. We're never going to hear of, Donald Trump will just fade into obscurity as a joke and such and such. And boy, were they turned on their head in that case. And I'll tell you what, they would pull off anything to win. And I think they've compromised plenty of people in our intelligence community, and plenty of them came out for Hillary Clinton. And don't kid yourselves, folks. They will absolutely use those levers, those mechanisms of power to serve their own purposes. And I think, again, they thought they were going to win and that it would not be exposed. Well, guess what? They didn't win, and it has been exposed, and it needs to continue to be exposed. So we have Roger. We're going to get Roger on the line with you here. We're going to be taking calls from listeners in the second hour, and we've got John Kiriakou, a CIA whistleblower, coming up. So this is the Stone Cold Truth on Genesis Communications Network. I'm your host, Tyler Nixon, with Roger Stone, to be joining us shortly. Don't go away. Welcome back, folks, to Stone Cold Truth here on Genesis Communications Network, broadcasting every Saturday from 1 to 3 Eastern Standard Time. We have a good show. We're going to take your calls in the second hour. Roger is currently getting his communications set up. Joining us, Travis Irvin, a favorite of Stone Cold Truth Radio. Travis?
Hey, Tyler. Good to be with you. Can you guys hear me okay?
You can, and which is amazing considering you're about, 4,000 miles away in Nicaragua?
Yes, absolutely. I'm calling from an undisclosed location on the Pacific coast of Nicaragua, and a windstorm actually took out the power here, so we're on the generator. So if you lose me, that's why.
God bless technology. I mean, what an amazing, you're that far away and it sounds that good.
I'm glad it does.
So we got probably a little bit of a delay, given how far you are away. Listen, the deep state, I think this is the burning topic. President Trump came out with some tweets today, just calling out directly the Obama administration. Obama thinks he's going to fade into the sort of not fade. He's kind of faded back from the presidency. And and you leave the presidency, you fade, no matter who you are. But going back to his community organizer role, or as I call it, communist agitator role, and basically he has been directing things behind the scenes, as I understand it, with his OFA, which was formerly Obama for America, became Organizing for America. And he is basically, they're trying to sabotage the Trump presidency as much as possible. And this this attempt to connect Trump and all of the folks around him, from the attorney general over to our esteemed master of ceremonies, Roger Stone, this attempt to create something that isn't there. And this is what they do. They attempt with this Sturm und Drang, this fog of lies and deception and half-truths and allegations. This is the Clinton modus operandi, basically, for years. They would distract. They would anything they could to keep this sort of fog of political war, that in which they can continue to do the dirty deeds that they do. And in this case, though, I really think they've definitely overplayed their hand. I mean, to use the term that's been used this week concerning, for example, the State of the Union response. But they've overplayed their hand because there's nothing there whatsoever. There is nothing. There's no truth to it. I mean, Jeff Sessions met with a Russian ambassador. So what? Do they really think that anybody would be that obvious? I mean, it's just, it really is laughable how they underestimate the cleverness of their opponents, so to speak, as if they're the only ones who are smart enough to disguise and to mask their dirty deeds. So Travis, where do you think this is headed? I mean, I think this could quickly turn around into an investigation of what went on in the Obama administration. As far as illegal.
I mean, sorry. No, that would certainly be something to see where this goes. It's fascinating that we're here in March now, and this has been a topic that has been reemerging since January. We've discussed it on the show at least once a month, if not more. And this is another area, the deep state and the deep state's involvement in trying to undo a democratically elected president in the United States. Whether you're for Trump or against Trump, that's what they're trying to do. And that's because that's what they've done in multiple foreign countries since their inception, since the intelligence apparatus was created in the United States since the 1940s. As we discussed last week, the amount of coups, even just here in Central America, where I am now. And it's a fascinating place where the progressive left and the libertarian right can unite and point to these areas where the deep state should not be doing this. I would point your listeners to Dennis Kucinich's recent appearance in February on Mornings with Maria on Fox Business, where he points out that there are rogue elements within the deep state that essentially, like you said, they were for Clinton. And that's because they wanted a proxy war in Syria to escalate tensions with the Russians so they could have billions more dollars poured into another Cold War. And I would also point your listeners to Glenn Greenwald on the fantastic progressive program Democracy Now! I have a little rule here as a libertarian that when I hear the same topics being discussed on InfoWars and on Democracy Now! And by guys like Glenn Greenwald and Julian Assange, that's when you know we're in trouble. And Glenn Greenwald, I think, has correctly pointed out that the deep state is trying to undo our own democratically elected president because Trump has vowed to fight the deep state. He's essentially going against their interests. And you nailed it earlier. The Clintons, that's who they were rooting for. And now, as you can see, that they lost, they are doing everything they can, everything within their little, well, it's not little, let's face it, it's a large realm of power. But, as Dennis Kucinich said on Fox Business, Trump's got to get this thing under control. Flynn was their first victim. It looks like now they're going after Sessions. Stone, obviously, our good pal Roger Stone seems to be a target. And let's face it, their biggest target right now is the president of the United States himself.
Yeah, it's really kind of disgusting how they have projection, I guess, is the word I'm searching for. I'm grasping for here. These people go on the air. They talk about what this administration might do, what the powers that they might wield, and so forth, and how they're sort of engaging in these underhanded connections to Russians and intelligence agencies, and this, corrupting the democratic process and all. And this is just classic projection. The Clintons, again, one of their tactics: accuse your enemies of that which you are most guilty, and that's exactly what's going on here. I mean, every allegation that you see come out. I mean, I like I said, I think it would be amazing if it turned around on them, and we started investigating the Obama administration, as we should, frankly, because the fact of the leaks alone, that there were FISA warrants and so forth against Trump confidants and people like Roger, alone is illegal conduct that needs to be investigated. And I just think they're playing with fire, but yet they're so power mad and they're so deluded and completely just out to lunch because they lost this election, that I think their mental faculties, their reasoning, their logic, if they can be said to have any, other than as just sort of ruthless, power mad, just megalomaniacs, basically. They're not thinking straight, because this is really could blow up more in their face. But I think they've realized they've lost the game, because with Trump in office, I mean, this man is truly a bull in the DC China shop. And I just love it. I mean, whatever you think of Trump, he definitely, you know who the man is. I mean, he's been in the public eye for practically 4 decades. There's no questions as to what he's never been. It just makes me laugh that they talk about these things that he could have done. For example, in that BS so-called intelligence dossier that came out about him. It's like, he is such a public figure. How could he possibly get away with this kind of stuff? You can't. That's how, unless you're, for example, like the Clintons, who sleaze around and muck around, and their ilk, and basically have intelligence agencies and others covering for them, and they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to worry about their dirty deeds being exposed, unless, of course, they're idiots enough, like John Podesta, to click on a link that exposes their entire email to whoever sent them a spoof. It's just it boggles my mind. I really hope Donald Trump, once they get the administration sort of really just solidifies here. I mean, they're only barely 2 months in. Really, just turn this around and crush this out of control intelligence. I hate to use the term intelligence, really, but whatever you want to call it, this deep state. But Travis, I'll tell you what, we're going to hold you over to the next segment with John. And I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to intro him a little bit, but can you stay with us?
Absolutely. And, John and I were on a Liberty tour last year in support of Governor Gary Johnson. So hey, I'm happy to give you guys a...
Sure, we got to jump, and we'll be back, folks, in a couple minutes here with John Kiriakou, CIA whistleblower. Stay with us.
In the New York Times best-selling book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, Roger Stone has gathered documents and uses his first-hand knowledge to construct the ultimate book to prove that LBJ was not only involved in JFK's assassination, but that he was in fact the mastermind. Find out how, and much more, in The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Get yours today at lbjkilledjfk.com. New York Times best-selling author Roger Stone brings you Nixon's Secrets. In Nixon's Secrets, Stone reveals how the Kennedys wiretapped Nixon's hotel room the night before the Nixon-Kennedy debate and stole Nixon's medical records from his psychiatrist's office. Stone lays out how Kennedy's running mate Lyndon Johnson stole Texas from JFK through voter fraud, while Mayor Richard Daley stole Illinois, and how JFK actually lost the popular vote. Get Nixon's Secrets today at stonecoldtruth.com.
Folks, listeners, friends, welcome to Stone Cold Truth Radio here on the Genesis Communications Network. I'm your host, Tyler Nixon. Roger is in the California desert and is experiencing a serious technical issue, so you'll have to bear with us. We're working overtime to get him tapped into the show. And in the meantime, though, we have Travis Irvin. And we were discussing deep state politics, and we're expecting to hear from John Kiriakou, who is a CIA whistleblower, and John is joining us as well. John, can you hear me?
I sure can. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, John. I was fascinated to read some of the information I found, just doing a little research on you. Tell you what, for the Stone Cold Truth audience, could you give us just a quick 1 minute of what's your story? It's astonishing. I can't believe
it's been an odyssey. That's for sure. I spent I spent almost 15 years in the CIA. The first half of my career was in analysis on the Middle East. I speak Arabic and Greek. And then the second half of my career was in counterterrorism operations. I was the chief of CIA counterterrorism ops in Pakistan after September 11th. And in that job, I led a series of raids in March 2002 that resulted in the capture of Abu Zubaydah, who we thought at the time was the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. He's still in custody in Guantanamo. And I captured more than 5 dozen other Al-Qaeda fighters over the course of that tour. I left the CIA in 2004 and went into the private sector. I was asked, though, before I left the CIA if I wanted to be what was called certified in the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. To make a long story short, I declined. I believed it was a torture program. I believed it was illegal and unethical, besides being illegal. But I kept my mouth shut. I kept my mouth shut until 2007. And in December of that year,
John, I'm sorry to let me just interrupt. Can you just give us like what was the worst of the techniques that you uncovered that you felt this was torture?
Well, the press has made a lot about waterboarding. I thought that there were techniques that were worse than waterboarding. Sleep deprivation certainly was worse. We know that people begin to lose their minds around day 7, and they begin to die around day 9 with no sleep. And the CIA was authorized to keep people awake for as long as 12 days. Wow. We've got prisoners now who are unable to participate in their own defenses because they're insane, thanks to that technique. And another one was called the cold cell, where a prisoner is stripped naked and chained to an eye bolt in the ceiling so he can't sit or lie down or get comfortable. And the cell is chilled to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And then every hour, somebody goes into the cell and throws a bucket of ice water on him.
Ugh.
And we actually killed people using that technique.
Jeez. So I'm sorry, because it's funny you say that because I served in the Army infantry in Germany, and when I went into the military, you think of like the stresses involved, and I think few recruits think of the one thing that's the worst of all, which is the sleep deprivation that you have to go through, and basically being cold. So it is torturous. There's times where you haven't slept in 2 days, 3 days. You're just constantly on the move, and you really start to go goofy. But so picking up where you were saying in 2007,
2007, I went public on ABC News. And within 24 hours, the FBI began investigating me. They investigated me for a year and then closed the case and said that I had not committed a crime, that I had not revealed classified information. But what I didn't know was 4 weeks later, when Barack Obama was inaugurated and Eric Holder became the Attorney General, that the CIA secretly asked Holder to reopen the case against me. And I had no idea that I was being investigated for the next 4 years. And then in January of 2012, I was finally charged with 5 felonies, including 3 counts of espionage, all coming out of that interview.
So you basically, did you release, now, what was the nature of the substance of the allegations that you released documents, what specifically?
Yeah, it was not documents, that I released information. I said 3 things in that interview. And this is what led to the charges. So
these were just verbal statements you're saying that...
Verbal statements.
Wow.
Correct. Verbal statements. I said that the CIA was torturing its prisoners. I said that torture was official U.S. government policy. It was not the result of a rogue officer, which is what President Bush had said. And I said that the president had personally approved of the torture program. And those 3 statements just completely changed the course of the rest of my life.
And those statements were obviously true statements.
Yeah, in fact, on the day that the Senate torture report was released, I was in prison at the time. I ended up having to take a plea, and I got 30 months in a federal prison. So on the day that the torture report was released, I happened to call my wife, and I said, "How was your day today?" And she said, "It was really good, actually." And I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "Because today the Senate torture report was released, and it proved that everything you said was true." And I have to tell you how happy that made me feel, because it was worth it. 23 months is what I ended up serving, but it was totally worth it because somebody had to say something.
Well, John, I just, as an American, I can't, I feel I should apologize or just tell you how regrettable I think it is that you had to be imprisoned, to be locked in a cage for telling the truth about crimes being committed by our own government. It's
so
really
much.
disgusting, and it makes me sick to my stomach that you were treated as you were, to have your life destroyed, to be confined as you were, in order to cover up the misdeeds and maldeeds of, frankly, folks who should themselves be imprisoned, who are in many ways treacherous, if not just outright traitors to what this country stands for and has always stood for and should stand for, at least. A constitutional republic, not some sort of nefarious, ultra uber government that just has, unlimited powers, can do anything it wants, to justified by these broad, generalized, war on terror kind of stuff. It really is. It leads us, I think, in a direction, as does this wiretapping stuff we've been talking about. It leads to a direction of a complete and total police state.
Isn't that really the important point? We are a nation of laws. At least we're supposed to be a nation of laws. And this is something we hold over so many other countries around the world. Look at us. We're a nation of laws. You should be like us. And in fact, at least as far as our government is concerned, we're only a nation of laws when it suits the government. Otherwise, they decide that they can do whatever they want.
It's really, and to be clear, you were prosecuted, as you said, by the Obama administration.
Yeah. Listen, I was prosecuted under the Espionage Act. The Espionage Act was written in 1917 to combat German saboteurs in the First World War. It was never updated. From 1917 to 2009, 3 Americans were charged under the Espionage Act for speaking to the press. But under the Obama administration, and remember, Barack Obama was the self-described most transparent president in history. Under Obama, 8 people were charged with espionage for talking to the press. Nobody gave information to our enemies. Nobody gave information for money or for personal gain. This is just people blowing the whistle on waste, fraud, abuse, and illegality in government. And Obama prosecuted all 8 of them.
Yeah, it's really disgraceful, I think. And let's face it, Obama it just makes me laugh that they talked about he's this change agent. The man was completely, in my view, in bed with the entire national security police state, sort of intelligence complex that has defiled this country, and even more so on overdrive since 9/11, and really is, at this point, trying to take down an actual, newly elected president. I mean, I haven't seen. I compared, at least privately, to many folks, President Trump to JFK, frankly, and people are like, JFK. What do you? Trump's nothing like JFK. Yeah, actually he is. Maybe not style wise, but he absolutely has taken on and has the ability to take on, and clearly has the guts to take on this rogue intelligence complex that is engaging in all this stuff that is un-American, anti-American, whatever you want to call it, and represents a complete defilement of our way of life, of our way of governing ourselves as a country. And what do you think is going to happen with President Trump? Oh, I'll tell you what. Let's say we got to cut to a break here, John. We're going to hold you over. This is fascinating. I think we want to explore this more, and I'm sure Travis might have a question or two, and we're going to get Roger in as well. So you are listening to Stone Cold Truth on the Genesis Communications Network. I'm your host, Tyler Nixon, and we're going to have John Kiriakou for a little longer, the CIA whistleblower. Don't go away.
This is Bernie Sanders, and you're listening to
Stone Cold Truth Radio. I'm sorry to interrupt Senator Sanders, but Roger Stone is of course the man after whom Stone Cold Truth Radio is named, is in the California desert and having some technical issues. So we're gonna try to get him to call in. Apparently the internet is down out there, and actually my internet is running slow as well. So I don't know if it's just a larger internet glitch, or if we're just having issues out in Palm Desert. But anyway, we've got John Kiriakou on the line, a CIA whistleblower, as well as Travis. Was still with us? Travis, you still with us?
Absolutely.
Okay. Travis I have to thank Travis Irvin, our good friend and comic, who's in Nicaragua right now, for bringing John onto the show. Travis, did you have any questions for John, or did you want to, is there anything that came up in your mind you wanted to ask? Because I think and John, I really appreciate your being with us, because I just...
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And hi, Travis. How are you?
Hey, John, it's great to hear from you again.
Same here, man.
John and I were on the Liberty Tour last year, which was an offshoot of Our America Initiative, which is another offshoot of the Governor Gary Johnson's campaign. And we're both came to libertarianism from the left. I know both of us once considered ourselves kind of Democrats, progressives, and I'm kind of starting a new term called libertarians, where there's people who are identifying as libertarian but who come from the left. And John, you have an incredible story that you told during the tour about getting a letter while you were in prison from Governor Gary Johnson. Would you mind sharing that story with everybody?
Oh, sure. You know, you go to prison and you're in complete and total shock. You just can't believe that you're there. So there I am. I'm in prison for about a week, and I get a letter from Gary Johnson. And I open it up, and it's a personal letter from Gary Johnson. And it says, essentially, I think you've been screwed. He said, I followed your case. I think you provided a great national service, and I think the government just screwed you, and I'm very sorry about that. And I thought, wow, I was so touched by this, that here's a guy who's a former two-term governor. He's a successful chief executive officer of a company. He's a candidate for president, and he's taken the time to write me this personal letter. It was just a very genuine and very touching thing to do. So I wrote him back and thanked him for his support. What I didn't know is that he also wrote letters to the Attorney General and to the head of the Bureau of Prisons, saying, what's wrong with you people? Let this guy go home to his family so he can earn a living, and so you don't ruin his family. And then he continued to write to me, and he continued to write to the head of the Bureau of Prisons, urging him to send me home on compassionate release or home confinement. He just kept up the pressure, and he did this out of the goodness of his heart. And so when I got home from prison in February 2015, again, I was only home a couple of days, and the phone rang, and it was Gary Johnson. And he said that he wanted me to join the campaign, and I said I would do whatever I could to help Gary Johnson and the Libertarian Party succeed in the election. And so I just feel like I'm so indebted to this man. I'm a supporter of not just him, but of his ideas and the ideas of the Libertarian Party, and it's my honor and pleasure to be associated with them.
Amen. Gary Johnson is a good man for sure, and I'm glad that that's been brought out, because it really shows that he does take what he says seriously in terms of having an accountable, just government in this country that would not imprison those who do what our government should be doing, which is being transparent and disclosing what it does to the people, so we can have the informed consent of the governed. Because consent can't be. There's no such thing as uninformed consent. You can't consent to something you don't know what you're consenting to. But where do you, looking towards the future, John, what do you see the next moves of the deep state? And having been, in the bowels of it yourself, I mean, are they going to persist with this? I mean, they're going to persist with it, we know, because they just go on and on. But
sure.
what about President Trump? What is he looking at here?
I think President Trump really has underestimated the power of this deep state. We've had presidents in the past who have not really gotten along very well with the CIA and with other intelligence organizations. Think of Jimmy Carter, think of Bill Clinton. But they weren't antagonistic with these organizations. I think Trump underestimated just how wily the CIA is and how much power and authority they have under the surface of things, where he can't really control them on a day-to-day basis. Now, I think the most optimistic scenario between the CIA and President Trump is that the CIA will just attempt to wait him out. I've said this publicly in the recent past. At the CIA, most of the senior officers have been around for 20, 25, 30 years. And they know that they can wait out this president, that he's only going to be president for 4 years or for 8 years. And they're going to still be around, still running the CIA. So a lot of them think they can just outwait him. With that said, if there are those who don't believe they can outweight him or who feel that he poses some kind of a danger to the organization, I wouldn't be surprised to see active measures being employed to try to force President Trump out of office, to try to force him to buckle to the CIA, or even worse. We just don't know.
Well, I would add to that list. You mentioned, I believe, Jimmy Carter. John F. Kennedy was quite antagonistic to the CIA, and we saw what happened to him.
You're exactly right.
I think anybody who doesn't believe that the Central Intelligence elements of the Central Intelligence Agency were involved in the assassination of President Kennedy have obviously not been paying attention. And I think this is a fear. I mean, when Trump was first elected, and frankly throughout the campaign, I honestly did, for the first time in my life, fear that there would be elements that would try to kill him, or in some way. Obviously they're trying to assassinate him politically with this incessant drip of nonsense and allegations, and the fog and the sort of trying to just besmirch and besmear his presidency before it's even gotten out of the gate. Mm-hmm. Comparatively, you look at how Obama has been handled. I mean, you would think Obama was literally a creation of the CIA if you were to look at how close he has been. And closely he's operated with that intelligence superstructure, and how in the tank, so to speak, it has been for him.
Oh, I think it was unprecedented, to tell you the truth, the closeness between Obama and the CIA. It's unlike anything I ever saw in my CIA career.
Yeah, and well, give us an example. I mean, this is what I'm curious about, I guess. You have the National Security Council. You have obviously your head of the CIA, which is appointed. I mean, Mike Pompeo. Do you know anything about this guy? And I think Trump, unfortunately, being a political outsider, had a dearth of people he could turn to who were truly loyal to him. What's the deal with our current CIA director?
I have a very close friend who was one of the senior most CIA officers through the 1990s and the early 2000s. And he's in the private sector now, but he's still frequently called upon to speak with people in positions of authority, mostly on the Middle East. And he told me just after the appointment of Mike Pompeo as CIA director that he has briefed Pompeo about a dozen times, always in a diner on Capitol Hill. And he said, whether or not you like or dislike Pompeo's domestic policies, he's really a serious man when it comes to intelligence and national security policy. So he said, if we're looking for adult leadership of the CIA, Pompeo's an okay guy. With that said, he really has no ties to Trump at all, no personal ties at all, and it's unclear really to whom he owes his political backing. But you could do worse than Mike Pompeo. Below Mike Pompeo, there's really nobody. I mean, there are no Trump loyalists inside the CIA. I think the CIA just believed at the time of the primary campaign that Trump was an aberration, and that they weren't going to have to deal with him. That they were fully intending to deal with President Hillary Clinton, and that just didn't work out. Another thing too. In 1992, I had already been at the CIA for 3 years, and I literally had no idea what my coworkers' politics were like. We never discussed politics. It never came up. The CIA is supposed to be apolitical. You're supposed to be there just to be serving the country. And then on the morning of the election, my branch chief said, guys, I know we're not supposed to talk about politics, but I'm really curious to know who you voted for this morning. And I'll never forget it. In my little branch, it was 3 for Bush, 3 for Clinton, and 2 for Perot. And I thought, wow, I guess I'm not the only liberal here in the CIA. And that apolitical attitude remained through the Bush administration, changed utterly when Barack Obama was elected president.
That's amazing. John, I'll tell you what, I'd like to get some calls in from the listeners if anybody is interested in that. Would you be able to hold over to the first segment of the next hour?
I can sure try.
Okay, great. And we still have Travis Irvine as well, and we are waiting on Roger to join us. Unfortunately, folks, apparently there's some internet issues out in the California desert where he's located.
Roger Stone,
apologize for that.
New York Times best-selling author,
This program is brought to you by the Genesis Communications Network, a world leader in talk radio since 1998. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Welcome back. The Stone Cold Truth on Genesis Communications Network. And I'm your host, Tyler Nixon. Joining us from the desert in California is Roger Stone. Of course, Roger, can you hear us?
Tyler, great to finally be with you. I apologize for our technical problems today. I'm in Palm Desert, and it is not that easy to get an internet connection, evidently.
So we do have John Kiriakou on the line as well still, and Travis. And John is a CIA whistleblower who exposed the torture that was going on. And I just, was fascinated, since you are now the target of the deep state, one of the targets, let's just say. I thought you might be interested to to hear what he has to say, or to ask him a question or two, since, now's your chance. You got a CIA whistleblower.
Well, this is a great opportunity. I refer back to a column that Glenn Greenwald wrote for The Interceptor several weeks ago, which I think put the entire question of the specter of Russian hacking that is alleged by some in our intelligence services in some perspective. First of all, they are yet to produce any evidence whatsoever that this really ever took place. What we have are allegations, assessments, projections. Sure, the New York Times writes that the Central Intelligence Agency and others have this information, but no one has yet to publish it. To be more specific, the New York Times said that the intelligence agencies were in possession of emails, records of financial transactions, and then later they reported, intercepts, meaning transcripts of telephone conversations. Where are they? Where is that evidence? Where's the beef? Where's the proof? All we have is a story that says they are in possession of these things. I can only speak to my own situation because I know that, and I recently learned that the FISA court is evidently did vote or approve a secret warrant to monitor my email communications, my text messages, my phone calls well over a year ago. That means, by definition, that the government was eavesdropping into conversations between myself and candidate and then later President-elect Donald Trump. Therefore, I take the claim by the president this morning that he was monitored and under surveillance at Trump Tower during the campaign quite seriously. If they were willing to do it in the case of his conversations with me, why would they be willing to wiretap the president? This does have echoes of Watergate and the role of the Central Intelligence Agency, which your guest today can speak to, is in fact incredibly similar to what happened in Watergate. We now know the Central Intelligence Agency had infiltrated the Nixon White House in the person of Alexander Butterfield. The story of how Butterfield was hired for the Nixon White House was a confection. He claimed that he had been recruited by Bob Haldeman, but Haldeman writes in his biography that indeed it was Butterfield who approached him about a White House situation. So, a White House position. So I think it's entirely possible, in fact, likely at this point, that the Obama administration was surveilling candidate Trump, President-elect Trump. I guess my question for your guest, John, is that what is the motive of the intelligence agencies? In other words, they are leaking without evidence repeatedly that Donald Trump's campaign was in touch with the Russians, was infiltrated by the Russians, or colluding with the Russians. They produce no evidence. The election's over. Trump has won. John, what's their motive in doing this?
Roger, first of all, it's such a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I think the short answer is that this is an issue of control. It's the CIA and the rest of the deep state that wants to maintain complete and utter control. And under a President Trump, they can't have that kind of control. Let's also look at what the CIA has done over the last 15 or so years. The CIA said that there was no torture program. That was a lie. The CIA said that there were no secret prisons. That was a lie. The CIA said that there was no extraordinary rendition. That was a lie. But now, on Russian hacking, they want us to just take their word for it, when in fact everything else that they've told the American people has been a lie. If there was Russian involvement with the Trump campaign, if there was Russian hacking of the Clinton campaign, show us the evidence. The American people aren't stupid. The American people can come to an informed decision. But the truth of the matter is that there is no such evidence. This is a red herring thrown out there by the Democrats and others, I think, coming back to the CIA in order to try to discredit the Trump campaign and now the Trump White House.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting to me that this whole narrative begins at exactly the time that Donald Trump challenges the Russians, saying, if you have Hillary Clinton's emails, her illegal emails from her unsecure server, you should make them public. Now, Trump is engaging in campaign politics, but from that moment on, Trump is in bed with the Russians, becomes a major meme, a major talking point of the Clinton campaign that is very shortly picked up by the Obama administration. The irony, of course, about this is there was a presidential candidate deeply in bed with Putin and the circle around him. There were presidential campaign aides making a small fortune doing errands for the clique around Putin. The problem is that candidate is Hillary Clinton and her henchman, John Podesta.
That's right.
As I wrote at Stone Cold Truth, Podesta is laundering Russian mob money, organized crime money for the Clinton Foundation, and is involved in various nefarious business activities in the region. So this is the chutzpah of Hillary Clinton. Accuse your opponent of doing exactly what you, in fact, are doing yourself.
And that's actually an old CIA trick. You know, there's something that we're taught in CIA training early on, and it's half jokingly, but half seriously. It's even emblazoned on T-shirts and coffee mugs, and that is admit nothing, deny everything, make counter-accusation. And that's exactly
actually
what
that's
we're seeing
one of Stone's most famous rules. It is you're right. It is a standard operating procedure in both in American political theater and certainly among our intelligence agencies. You're right on the money.
Yeah, but you note the difference, Roger. You're a political operative. You know, those rules should not be used necessarily in a domestic political context by an intelligence agency, for God's sake. And which is exactly what's going on. And I'm personally...
No, I agree. They shouldn't be used in a governmental setting. We're now not in politics, although in a way we are, of course. I think the larger issue here is really simple. It's war. The folks at Langley, folks over at the Pentagon, they ache for war. They long for it. War over Syria, hot diggity. Let's try for a no-fly zone. There's the guarantee for World War III. Hillary's donors and the donors to the Clinton Foundation make a small fortune out of war. They want war. And the expansion of the proxy war in Syria, that's a great opportunity for the neocons. Unfortunately for them, along comes Donald Trump. He prefers negotiation. He prefers détente. He prefers, attempting to at least sit down with Vladimir Putin.
Roger, we're coming up on a break. I'm sorry to interrupt. We're gonna hold you over. We're gonna hold both of you over, actually, and we're gonna take calls. Take some calls from listeners, if that's all right with you all. And this is a fascinating conversation, actually, and I think we should carry it forward. So you're listening to Stone Cold Truth on the Genesis Communications Network. Don't go away. And the Stone Cold. Technical difficulties today. I must apologize to the listeners. It's been a struggle for sure. We'll get that all sorted out, and everything will be back to normal for the next edition of Stone Cold Truth. On the line, on both lines, we have John Kiriakou, who is a CIA whistleblower, and of course, Roger Stone himself, joining us from the desert of California, and we're discussing the deep state and the meddlings currently into the American political system by this intelligence complex, the intelligence industrial complex that has so much power and can access any information to the point of wiretapping our own president. Roger, there has to be a chilling effect here. I mean, do you pause sometimes and think, geez, somebody's listening right now? You have just about objective proof that somebody's listening to your conversations as you do it. I mean, do you feel chilled? Do you feel hesitant to speak frankly with President Trump?
Well, The Guardian reported that the secret FISA court approved this warrant on the basis of no evidence or probable cause. As you know, as an attorney, Tyler, the FISA court, unlike our normal courts, doesn't require any probable cause or reason. The government asks to spy on a U.S. citizen, and it is granted in 99% of the times that the government makes such a request. It has not come to my attention until recently. Now, of course, I have to be exceedingly concerned about any conversation I might have with the president on the phone. It really does have a chilling effect because there are a number of important topics I'd like to discuss with him, but now I am reticent to do so because I don't know who's listening. This is Kafkaesque. This is like 1984. The fact that we even have to consider this, as I have said quite recently, this would mean that the Central Intelligence Agency has my grocery list. They have the back and forth emails between my wife and I, between members of my family and I, between my business associates and me. But particularly disturbing to them is the fact that there's one thing they don't have: any contact whatsoever between me and the Russians. This is a witch hunt. It's a canard. It's a falsehood. It's disinformation, and it will now be proven. In other words, if you have evidence of contacts with the Russians or evidence of a crime, indict me. I challenge you. I dare you. They have nothing. There is nothing. I believe this is also true in the case of Paul Manafort, certainly true in the case of President Trump. So the false narrative continues, but yes, it is an exceedingly chilling situation, and now I have to give pause to any conversation I might have with the chief executive.
John, I want to, this is fascinating to me. Can you give us any insight into how this type of intelligence, what the nuts and bolts process is of gathering it and then disseminating it when you would say wiretap someone or, start monitoring all their communications? Do you have any insight you can give us?
Sure. It depends on which organization has primacy. For wiretaps, it's usually NSA. Sometimes it's FBI. Only very rarely is it CIA. And in my experience, that's solely overseas. But anyway, it doesn't really matter who has primacy. What happens is, let's say Roger Stone's phone is tapped. The organization that has primacy comes up with a transcript of that. An analyst boils it down to its substance, so that the transcript is not released as a transcript, but it's released as a finished intelligence report, and then it's put into the intelligence community system. So it's not just held in some computer; it's actually disseminated, and it could be as many as several thousand people would then have access to it. Now, it's retained in intelligence databases. So someday, eventually, if someone wants to build a case against you, it's all there. And in the meantime, since it's classified, you have no idea that this case is being built against you. It's all being done in secret. And this is the point, too, of the Justice Department doing this through the FISA court. They want it to be done in secret because they want you to have to be reactive. They don't want you to be proactive. They want to take you by surprise. They want to separate you from your natural allies. They want to impact you financially and politically. They want, when you're finally charged, for people who would normally support you to walk away from you in order to save themselves and protect themselves. And that way they break you down. And that's why 98.2% of federal cases are settled with a plea bargain, because you're so exhausted and you're so broken down that you just can't afford or can't emotionally and mentally bear the idea of then going to trial. 98.2% of cases in the federal system are the results of plea bargains.
Yeah, indeed. And so you're saying that in addition to these summaries, transcripts, reports, the actual data itself, like the recordings, I'm assuming, they record, all that is preserved and in the system, so people can go back and listen.
It's all preserved. And in fact, there's a new NSA facility in Utah, in the desert in Utah, that has enough memory built into it that it can collect and hold and maintain every email, every text message, and every telephone call from every American for the next 500 years.
That is absurd. It's beyond. It's truly frightening. I mean, this is beyond Orwell.
It is. It's beyond
what's
Orwell.
really ironic,
as Roger said.
What's really ironic, Tyler, is just the leak of the fact that General Flynn was under surveillance is a felony. Just the leak that the FISA court approved a warrant, presumably into my communications, that's a felony. So John is absolutely right. They move in deep secret. They don't want to tip you off. It's an outrageous violation of your personal privacy. It's an outrageous invasion of your civil liberties. It's Big Brother gone amok. My strong suggestion to President Trump is that he should smash the CIA into a million pieces, as John F. Kennedy has said. It is time to march John Brennan in front of a federal grand jury and start asking tough questions. It is time to order the FBI to, yes, surveil the top ranks of the FBI, surveil the top ranks of the intelligence services to find the leakers, prosecute them, and jail them.
I want to thank John for joining us. Go ahead, John. We got about 15 seconds.
Oh, no, that was Roger finishing his thought.
Yep. John, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I think we'd love to have you back for a little more in-depth when Roger is not, when we don't have these technical issues. But I think you're a patriot, and we really appreciate you joining the Stone Cold Truth. Thank you
so much for the opportunity and for your support. It would be a pleasure to speak with you again.
Sure. Roger, I'm going to hold Roger over for another segment, and we're going to take some calls. You're listening to Stone Cold Truth on the Genesis Communications Network. To Stone Cold Truth. Here on Genesis Communications Network, we are talking deep state politics and the out-of-control intelligence industrial complex that is infesting the American political system and defiling our institutions and our way of life. And unfortunately, Roger has some technical issues out in the California desert, but is joining us by phone. Roger, the president tweeted out some interesting stuff this morning, comparing what's going on with his, the infiltration electronically of his communications, his campaign, with what went on in Watergate. To me, as I said before, I think the plumbers and so forth, these were sort of, the CIA was in the background of it, but it wasn't as though the CIA or any agency itself was responsible, whereas what we see now is the entire government itself, within the intelligence complex being turned against American political figures, yourself included. I mean, this is unprecedented. It's worse than Watergate, far worse than Watergate.
You're absolutely right, Tyler, and I look forward to being back in the saddle next Saturday when I can be back in the host chair. You can be back in the co-host chair, so I appreciate you're filling in for me here on short notice. At the same time, it's great to be here with the Stone Cold Truth audience because there is so much news to break. You're absolutely right. What we're witnessing is worse than Watergate. I can tell you out here in Palm Springs.
If anybody wants to call in, and this is what we're going to try to incorporate more, 877-300-7645. And again, that's 877-300-7645 to call in, and you can ask Roger Stone any question you want. So give us a call. But Roger, go ahead. We're talking about worse than Watergate.
Well, it is. You're absolutely right. The Watergate attempt to wiretap the Democratic National Headquarters was a partisan political effort by some misguided supporters of Richard Nixon. There is still, to this day, no evidence that the president himself knew about this in advance or approved it, largely because Richard Nixon had been in politics long enough to know that there was nothing at the Democratic National Headquarters worth learning, that there is no action at the party headquarters in the presidential race. What you have today is much more serious. It is a branch of the government spying on another branch of the government, indeed spying on the supreme branch of the government, the executive. This is a CIA out of control. I hear good things about Richard Pompeo, the new CIA director, but this agency needs a house cleaning top to bottom. And John Brennan, the former CIA director, veteran member, an activist in the U.S. Communist Party, a convert to Wahhabism, a man who publicly refused to be sworn with the Bible when he became CIA director. Last week, when he put out a statement saying he's not a leaker, he essentially confirmed to the American people that he is the leaker. That's how politics works. The first guy who jumps out and says, I didn't do it, that's the guy who did it. It's time for his to be dragged in front of a grand jury and for him to be prosecuted. I've always thought he is a traitor. I've always thought he was actually a mole for the Saudi government. And now he's so dumb he's walking into the buzzsaw. No, Mr. Brennan, you did do it, and it will be proven. I assure you, President Trump will prove it. So, we're in a whirlwind here. The other little piece of news I have for you, Tyler, is that President Obama and his wife have secretly purchased a home here in Palm Springs. They've done it through the name of an attorney. He intends to apply to the Thunderbird Golf Club, the Thunderbird Country Club, one of the finest golf courses in the country. My sources also tell me that the membership of that club will vote him down as a member.
Oh, interesting.
He will then scream racism. But the facts are that Presidents Gerald Ford and Dwight Eisenhower were both also rejected for membership simply because the members don't want their club invaded by the Secret Service, don't want their club invaded by a presidential, or in this case, post-presidential entourage. So you heard it here first, but it is breaking news here on the Stone Cold Truth.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Roger, Donald Trump is a savvy guy, clearly. I mean, to have run and built the organization that he has, he's no dummy, and I think he really is very savvy and intuitively savvy in many ways politically, but he does not have that experience that, they often dinged him on in government, which, of course, the Clintons, who had spent their lives pursuing government power, understood the levers and the mechanisms. What are his options, really, in terms of, he's putting out tweets, and it's good to inform the public and to bring the issue, start hitting back. But, what would you suggest to him? What would be your advice to, what concrete steps he could take? I mean, can he order, issue any orders? I mean, it's difficult because there's so many layers and levels that he has to deal with. What can he do?
To begin with, Tyler, he should order the immediate release of any evidence the government has of Russian involvement in the election. Call their hand. The alleged email, the alleged financial records, the alleged precepts, order them released publicly immediately. There's nothing to release, in my opinion. the last time this happened, as you know, what was released was copies of RT, Russian television tweets criticizing Hillary Clinton. Not exactly the stuff of deep espionage. They got nothing. The CIA has nothing. They have zero. It is a tissue of lies. And now that they have my email communications, it will be proven. I can sleep at night knowing what they have and what they don't have. So it is incumbent on the president. Clean out the CIA. Can the head of the FBI, can him and order a grand jury investigation into him as well? Because I think he is a flaky character. He needs to clean out the top levels of these intelligence agencies that opposed his election and now are trying to destabilize his presidency. They're breaking the law, start sending people to jail, and I think he can restore order. Look, I have great affection and respect for Donald Trump. He has the capacity to be one of our greatest presidents, and this is a concerted campaign, if not by Obama himself, by Obama holdovers, to destabilize his government. It is illegal what they are doing. He needs to enforce the law. I'm convinced the effort to destabilize the Attorney General is an effort to avoid prosecution. Let's go after the Attorney General so he can't go after us, I think, is what's going on in the agencies. It boggles the mind that we are, after an election, in a situation in which the president got no honeymoon. He has had no goodwill from the Democrats. He gave a conciliatory and uplifting and unifying speech last week. Look at the look on the face of Nancy Pelosi. Well, it's probably not a good example because there's nothing on her face that can move. But look at the look on the face of Congressman Elijah Cummings. Literally, a man so stupid he could not be employed in any line of work other than politics. We're talking about a man with an IQ of 70. He keeps saying that I work for the Russians. Congressman, waive your congressional immunity. Let me sue you, and we'll decide who in court works for the Russians and who has maligned me in a way that is designed, I guess the words are reckless disregard for the truth. I mean, really, Congressman Elijah Cummings, this guy's a lowlife. He could not exist in any other job because he's so dumb and incompetent. He represents an inner city district in Baltimore, and he literally doesn't know his derriere, from his elbow.
Well, Roger, we're going to hold you over again for one more segment because I don't want to, I understand the technical difficulties. We are going to put the lines open for calls. I also want to hear, basically Keith Ellison, as an example, after the State of the Union address, it was incoherent. I mean, they can't come up with anything concrete against Trump. So, it's very interesting. You're listening to the Stone Cold Truth here on the Genesis Communications Network. Don't go away. Back for the final segment of Stone Cold Truth with Tyler Nixon and, of course, Roger Stone here on the Genesis Communications Network. We've been talking the deep state, talking the infiltration of our intelligence community into our political world, and So we do have a call, actually. We have Ann from Reno. Ann, welcome to Stone Cold Truth.
Hi, am I on the air?
You sure are. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for this Roger Stone. First of all, would it help his fight against the globalists if he went after the NSA and made a data collection?
Actually, Roger's calling right back in. I think his battery was starting to go down on him. So I'm sorry. Your first question was, say that again. I apologize, Ann.
No problem. If Donald Trump went after the NSA, made a data collection, and started firing people from the NSA, would that actually stop the globalists, or would that actually empower them?
Well, while we're waiting for Roger to get back on the line, we also have Travis Irvine still with us. And Travis, I appreciate your patience as well. Well, I guess we don't have Travis.
Absolutely. Good to still be here.
Okay, sure. And yeah, Roger's calling right back in, and I'll repeat the question to him. But the problem is that these agencies are sprawling and deep, and it's not called the deep state, just because it's beneath the surface. It also runs very deep, and it's very difficult to just shut these off. I mean, they purposely are built to have a lot of compartmentalization and removal, and areas where certain people can't go and certain people don't have clearances. It's a web, really, and it's sort of built that way on purpose, which makes it really difficult, honestly, to deal with when it's been turned against our own political system and our own leaders, and frankly, the president himself. And it makes it's a frightening prospect, because this has not been built overnight. And there's probably, I would think, areas of this intelligence complex that we don't even know about. We don't even know they exist, and they can do anything they want. They operate in secret, and it's as I mentioned, Orwellian. There's no other better word for it. But Roger has rejoined us, actually, and Roger, we have Ann from Reno with us, and she has asked about whether Trump could just simply begin firing people at the NSA and really cleaning house there. What his options are.
I think he could do that. The question we have to ask is whether or not his options are being properly presented to him. I've gone on record a number of places saying that my greatest concern going forward was not the opposition of liberal Democrats, but the opposition of establishment Republicans. Trump is a fighter. He is, as Nixon used to say, he's up for the big play. He has sweeping executive powers. So, yes, he could clean house at the CIA. By the way, as President Jimmy Carter did when he inserted Admiral Stansfield Turner as the CIA director, and he cleaned out the second and third level of the CIA, who had been responsible for the lies regarding Iran-Contra, the lies regarding the Vietnam War, the lies regarding the assassination and murder of John F. Kennedy. Our earlier guest, John, was really on the money when he pointed out these are the same people who lied about torture during the Iraq War. They lied about rendition. They lied about Benghazi. They lied about virtually every major scandal that we've had in government regarding our foreign policy over the last 30 years. So, yes, I think the president has the power to clean house, and he should clean house. But the question we have to ask is, are his attorneys, are his advisors telling him that that's an option? Or are they arguing that we have to make peace with the CIA, which is, of course, impossible, literally impossible.
It's as though they've compartmentalized the president himself, ironically. And you had another question?
Yeah, here's a question. If I wanted to run for Congress at age 25, what would you suggest?
Did you hear that, Roger? Ann has said if she wants to run for Congress at age 25, did you have any suggestions for her?
Yes, first of all, I always admire anybody who gets in the arena. See, the credit belongs to the person who gets in the arena, not the person who stands on the sidelines and points out everything they're doing wrong. So my hat is always off to someone who enters the lists. But go in with your eyes open. This is, as President Trump has said, it's a rigged system. The goal of most incumbent members of Congress is simply reelection. They get free health care. They get a nice salary. They get all kinds of benefits. They don't have to join a health club. They've got a gym for members of the House and Senate side. And the special interests dominate this process with big money. The valiant woman, state senator, who challenged the mentally unbalanced John McCain, a guy who I've known for 40 years, who I supported for Congress, supported for the Senate, supported for president, I now sadly conclude that he's mentally unbalanced. He's cranky. He's bitter, and he's very, very jealous of President Trump, who was able to pull off what Senator McCain could not pull off. he had a serious challenge in the Republican primary against a woman state senator who's highly qualified. She could have won, but he drowned her in special interest money in the last 2 weeks, dropping almost $10 million, bought and paid for by the corporate interests. So the champion of campaign finance reform is, in fact, owned by the special interest. Nobody has trafficked in more dirty money than John McCain. By the way, Senator, if you're listening, the $10 million you got from the Saudis for the John McCain Foundation, the one you try to claim has no connection to you, that all your former Senate aides are running and the board members are all your closest friends, give the money back. It's dirty money, Senator. Give the money back.
Well, Ann, we appreciate your call, and thank you for listening to Stone Cold Truth.
Here's one more question.
All right, real quick.
What would the president think of a lobbyist tax? Just tax the special interest based on how much they lobby.
Roger, she was
Tyler,
asking.
Can you go ahead? Repeat the question.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, lobbying is protected as a free speech activity, to some extent, and I think you would personally. This is my opinion. I don't think that would pass constitutional muster. I think you can certainly ask, have lobbyists register when they represent someone else. But I think targeting that specific activity for a tax would never pass constitutional muster, and it shouldn't.
No, but the idea of lobbying reform, in other words, you want to be a lobbyist, you should have to file your tax returns. We should have to see your tax returns. If you want to be in government and you want to leave government and become a lobbyist, perfectly reasonable. But there should be a 10-year waiting period, not 2. I think there's a number of ways that President Trump could clean up the system by cracking down on lobbyists to make the entire system more transparent and to avoid the revolving door. Members of Congress or members of the government pushing a program or entity while they're in office and then leaving office and immediately benefiting from the work that they have done personally. That could be avoided with really strenuous lobby reform.
And thanks so much for the great questions and for your call. We appreciate it. Well, I have to agree with you, Roger, on the lobbying reform. One of the things that I proposed when I ran for office back in Delaware was that I'm not so concerned with curbing lobbying activities as much as that they are transparent, whereby every meeting and the subject of the meeting must be posted or disclosed with any public official. I mean, it's real simple. If you want to meet with State Senator so-and-so about the highway bill, that has to be posted. That has to be publicly, in other words, you're not going to get to meet with any government official unless the subject, content, and so forth of that meeting is published and disclosed and in detail. So, look, I think, again, the best disinfectant of all is always sunshine.
Makes the cockroaches run, that is for sure. Speaking of Delaware, Tyler, I hear that there is going to be a forthcoming expose on former Vice President Joe Biden and his family. That it is, I'm told, a sordid tale of corruption, sex, drugs, impropriety that is going to perhaps impact the long-term impression of Senator Biden. So maybe next week we can talk about that. I apologize again to our listeners for our torture communications today, but tune in next Saturday. I will be back fully in the saddle with my sidekick and co-host, Tyler Nixon.
Well, Roger, it's always a pleasure. And again, I likewise apologize to the listeners for our technical errors or technical issues today, and we appreciate your hanging with us. Roger, don't get black bagged out there in the desert. We'll look forward to being back with you next week and on the Stone Cold Truth here on Genesis Communication Network. And this has been edition number 21 of Stone Cold Truth. We'll see you next week, folks. Have a great weekend.